A group of Western politicians, diplomats, military leaders recently gathered at the Halifax Security Forum. That is a national security conference held every year in Canada. Its official aim is to foster cooperation between Western democracies, with China high on the agenda in recent years. This year, the forum released a China Handbook, where China was labeled as the most powerful authoritarian state in history, quote unquote, and a major challenger to the liberal world. They also called on Western democracies to strengthen alliances to contain China's influence in multiple fronts. Is this fear-mongering, or are there legitimate fears? Where are relations between China and the West heading? Joining me for the discussion in Beijing is Wang Cong, chief reporter of the Global Times, and via Skype in Washington, D.C., a Stanley Kober, defense and foreign affairs analyst. Wang Cong, let me go to you first. This security conference actually worked out a China Handbook entitled China versus Democracy, the Greatest Game. What is Halifax Security Forum? I mean, is this largely a talk shop? How much weight do speakers and panelists there really have on policymaking in Western capitals?
Well, I think the Halifax has been very influential in the Western world in terms of security. However, what they produced this year, this handbook, is nothing but, let's put in the words of U.S. President-elect Joe Biden, malarkey. I saw the handbook and the conclusion that China as a threat, as a challenge to the Western world is, I don't know where they're feeling this, because, I mean, has China invaded any of those countries? Has China threatened to invade any of those countries? I really don't get it. I mean, when I say that, I'm sure I speak for a lot of people in China when they say that China is a threat to any country, you know, or the Western world. So judging from this handbook, I think this forum has gone down, you know, a lot.
Well, Stanley, what do you think? I mean, what do you make of the forum's conclusions that China is a major challenge to Western liberal system and, you know, to the liberal values?
As I've mentioned before, I was a student in the Soviet Union. You didn't see Soviet students here, and there was very little dialogue. China has opened up. You've had hundreds of thousands of students come over here, as well as opening up with tourists and so on. This is very different. And I'm a little bit dismayed that this is totally ignored. There is hope for the relationship with China, with all our young people interacting. And this is a problem I have with a lot of my own colleagues. They don't see this. And I guess I was very affected by my experiences in the Soviet Union. You could see the Soviet students wanted to reach out to us, but there was this barrier. And with the Chinese students, up until recently, I haven't seen this. But now there's a little bit more concern, more nervousness, more apprehension. I think this is a great tragedy, because there was, to my mind, a lot of hope here.
Stanley, you know...
May I make...
Yeah, excuse me, but, you know, the conclusion that China is a challenger to the liberal world is largely based on the, you know, the assumption that China is not, you know, a Western liberal democracy, and, you know, it is still based largely on liberalism, a school of thinking that in the West that says the world would be safer and more secure with democracies coming together, with more trade with each other. Unfortunately, China is not what the West hopes it would become. How relevant do you think this school of thinking in resolving today's challenges, from COVID to the economic slowdown?
Recently, I read that President Xi, I think it was in his speech at Shenzhen, said, we want to tear down walls. You know, I associate walls with the Berlin Wall, you know, child of Cold War. And that's it. I have seen that President-elect Biden has also referred to reversing the policy of building walls. And what is important to me here is not only the physical walls, but the psychological walls, the us against them mentality. And this is what's beginning to disturb me here. Again, when I talk to people from China coming over here, academics, and the students. I get to know some of the students. They're interested in learning here. This is not an authoritarian culture. They come over here and they are interested in learning. There's an interest in a dialogue. And it just stuns me that's not appreciated here.
Yeah, there are 300,000 of them, at least last time I checked.
Wang Cong, I meet them.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful attitude.
Yeah. Actually, many of my colleagues working behind the scene right now are overseas returnees. They studied in the United States. Wang Cong, let me turn to you. The China Handbook, published by this forum, says the world's democracies need a plan, saying this: the challenge is no longer about trying to cooperate with a rising China. The real China challenge is for the world's democracies to, deciding how to cooperate effectively with each other. What do you make of that?
Well, fear-mongering, the first word comes to mind when you heard that. That is not, they said it out loud that they're not looking for cooperation with a country of 1.4 billion people. That is the second largest economy in the world. I don't know what they're preaching, but they say it out loud as if it's normal, but it's not. It's fear-mongering, and ultimately it could be war-mongering. And speaking back to this, the challenge, the threat rhetoric, seriously, I mean, what China has done is nothing but to advance its economy, lift millions of people out of poverty, and improving people's life. I don't know, China has not fired any shot, has not invaded any country. Where is this threat comes from? I mean, it's really puzzling for many people here. And when I hear this and how people ask me how you respond to this, ultimately, I think action speaks louder than words. When China improves people's lives, I think people will see, just like the COVID-19 pandemic. People, Western media rushed to criticize China's response, but look at where we are now. And I think people are feeling good here where we are.
Right. Stanley, let me turn to you. The liberals in the West are becoming hostile towards China, more or less because they believe China is not becoming more liberal or democratic or more like them. So first of all, is their assumption that 30 years of engagement with China failed to make China more liberal or democratic a myth or a reality?
That is the assumption here. I take my inspiration in this regard from a German physicist of a century ago, Max Planck. And he said, new ideas don't take over because the generation in power learns the new ideas, implements the new ideas. New ideas take over because the younger generation learns the new ideas, and then they gradually succeed to the positions of influence and power. So you have to look at generational change. Again, this is why I come back to the students. I'm not expecting them to accept everything here, but they accept something. We all learn from each other. And my sense is if we weren't so influenced by this Cold War thinking, that gradually over time we would see an evolution of the two societies coming together. I see a lot of overlap of values. You're talking about the study that talks about authoritarianism. I never hear that. When I talk to the Chinese students, what I hear is the devotion to their parents. My colleague here just mentioned raising, Chinese people out of poverty. Chinese people have worked very hard. The students know this. They are so grateful to their parents for working hard to provide for their future, for sending them over here. Most of your students pay the tuition, but they do it because they think this is the future. I saw this with my own parents. They fled Germany after the Eastern Europe after the Holocaust, came over here. They were focused on my future, on the education. It's this bond. And I think if we just let this develop naturally, it wouldn't move in a straight line, but the two societies would come together over time.
Right, Wang Cong, do you agree with Stanley? He said there will be an evolution where the two societies, meaning China and the United States, gradually coming together.
Well, let's hope. I hope that will come true. But speaking of students and exchanges, yes, I myself studied in the United States too, and because I want to see what's the system there about. However, what we're saying is it's not about it's appreciated there or not. It's about U.S. government effectively putting restrictions, putting wall, if you so to speak, that restricting a lot of Chinese students from going to the United States to study, and also in doing so, like the professor said, it will create a further misunderstanding on the younger generations, because if a lot of my friends from the U.S., for example, they have never traveled to China. However, they read a lot about China in the news media, and that kind of forms their conception of China, which is very, very biased. So I think that's very important. However, where we are now, it seems that we're heading to a very, very dark period where the Western world, not just the United States, in Australia also, they're accusing Chinese students there of spying without any concrete evidence. So right now what we're seeing is that, just like the handbook suggests, a Western country, at least among some elites, trying to form this alliance against China, which is very, very dangerous. But from the Chinese perspective, yes, that's exactly what we want, that a peaceful coexistence between two different systems, two different countries, two different societies. That's what the Chinese people want. That's what the Chinese officials have been preaching. But that's not getting, the message is not getting across, apparently, in the Western world.
Yeah. Hopefully, the two societies, meaning China and the West, will find their sweet spot and come together. After all, so much is at stake. When you think about student exchange, people-to-people exchange, the cultural programs, and of course, the security interests and climate change. I want to thank both of our guests, Wang Cong, chief reporter at Global Times, and joining us from Washington, Stanley Kober, defense and foreign affairs analyst. Thank you both so very much.